Alright, so you're going to take that off of the back here. I'm going to take your hammer spring out. Now, when you tune your hammer spring, normally I cut a few coils off the hammer spring just to relieve the tension on there. A lot of it comes out pretty, well, the spring's actually pretty tight inside there. I don't know if tight's the right word, but anyway, so basically cut a few coils off the spring, off the hammer spring. If the velocity drops too much, then I normally shim it up. So you just use a few washers and stuff like that. You just shim the hammer spring up, and then basically once you've done that, you can put it back in there. That's a quick solution. The real what you should really do on the M10 rifle is get to the hammer itself. So let's just undo. This is 4 Allen key. You're gonna undo the screw on top of the breech. Just pop that out there, and then there's another one just behind where the hammer spring goes, so you undo that one as well. Let's get that out. Okay, and then the last two that we're going to remove is on the valve itself there. Okay, so just open that up. Loosen those ones. Okay, and once you do that, your whole assembly comes out. So that's basically what your hammer and your valve assembly looks like all together. Now, as you can see on here, you've got your transfer port, which is normally made a bit larger. That's obviously to unrestrict the flow going through there. That normally helps with efficiency. And we are going to have a look at the valve, and then we're also going to have a look at the hammer spring now. So let's take the valve out first. So again, this is like a 3. Most of the screws on the M10 rifle are 3 and 4 millimeter size. So if you got a 3-4, you'll get far. Okay, so I'm just going to remove the valve there, and that's basically the valve. This is what creates the power of the M10, and it's a pretty nice valve. There's not really much you need to do to it, other than, like I said earlier on, the poppet that closes the valve got damaged on my one, so it had to be remade by a friend of mine, and yeah, it seems to be holding up now, and I think that's the only thing that's really wrong with this valve. You don't really need to do anything else to it, to be honest. I know the guys with the 177 struggle a little bit if this is the same size valve that's inside there, but for 22, 25, I reckon even a 30 caliber M10 would push pellets at close to supersonic speed. Okay, so that's the valve. Not very interesting. I showed you earlier on how to unscrew the cap, obviously adjust the hammer spring tension inside there. So if you've got a 177 or a 22 that you want to shoot, I wouldn't say sub 12 foot-pounds, but get it down to a speed where the pellets are stable and you're going to get your best accuracy. I would say trim you don't ever trim the valve spring. You're going to want to shim that up so that there's more valve tension on there, so when the hammer hits the pin at the rear, you don't get much play, so less air comes out of there. Okay. So this is basically what's left of the M10. Your hammer. So I think this is the only big bolt that's Allen screw that's in here. This is for your hammer. Just undo the bolt there. And your hammer should come out just like that. Okay. Obviously make sure your hammer is nicely lubricated as well. It's actually a big help in terms of cocking and for smoothness inside there. But now this hammer coming straight out of the factory is extremely heavy. As you can see on here, this is as far as I know, the guy who worked on my rifle previously drilled a hole in the hammer to reduce the weight slightly of the hammer, and obviously when there's less weight on there, there's less inertia, it's less likely to get hammer bounce on there. Okay, so that is one of the first things, aside from the hammer spring tension. I would highly recommend that you lighten your hammer because it's extremely heavy. Also one of the reasons why your M10 shoots so hot straight out of the factory. So I'm going to reinstall this now. So I'm going to put the caps back in and tighten this up. Now I'm going to go do a full reverse of this now. It doesn't take long to assemble and reassemble this rifle. Just make sure everything's tightened up nicely. Obviously around the hammer, put a bit of lubricant, silicone grease or something like that. That always helps. Okay. There's nothing that really needs to be changed on the actual breech block itself. As I mentioned earlier on, my transfer port on this thing, and the breech transfer port had to be machined out because I changed the caliber of my rifle. So that had to be done. It's fairly easy as well. I mean, changing calibers, obviously going 357 is going to be a problem. Going from 22 to 177, you're going to have to machine the bolt probe, but going from 22 to 25, that's not really a big problem. The breech transfer port just needs to be machined out a bit, and maybe the O-ring groove deepened slightly because you basically eat away at the actual groove itself. Anyway, let's back to business. Let's reassemble this. So I'll put this back on here. Now, when you do this, when you reassemble this, make sure that your bolt probe on here is pushed right forward, and that your hammer is also in a similar position. As when you pull your bolt probe back, you pull the hammer back and then obviously cock the rifle. If it's not aligned like that, it may not actually work properly. So let's put some of these screws back. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is, this is just a test which I'm going to do, but basically, because I have a regulated rifle, I'm going to increase the regulated pressure on this rifle. I am going to loosen the valve spring tension on here, as it's not a full 3000 psi on the valve itself. At the moment the regulator is set to 125 bar, and that's the reason why I'm dismantling the rifle at the moment, is just to increase the regulator pressure. Okay, so I'm putting the valve back in. Follow the same process. You're going to just pop these screws back in here again. This is what keeps the valve to the hamspring body. Those screws back in there. Just a word of caution. The screws on the valve body, and especially the screws on the rear for the hammer spring, do not over tighten them. I over tightened one of the ones on the hammer spring and actually sheared the threading off inside the end cap. So don't over tighten those screws. We're gonna get the valve locked on now. Just if you don't know, I'm pretty familiar with this rifle, so I know pretty much what screws go in where. But if you don't, just obviously lay your screws up in an organized manner so you don't get confused. Okay, so I'm just tightening the valve back onto the breech block. Okay, so those screws are done. Okay, so we've got basically our assembly back together again. What we need to do now is refit the trigger. Now this, guys, you need to be really careful. I don't know if you can see on here, there are two small springs on there, and those things really like to jump out when you're fiddling around with your rifle. So this is the finicky bit. Okay, so let's reassemble that like that. Oops, using the wrong Allen keys here. Let's pop that back in again. Now obviously before you start reassembling the entire rifle, you need to make sure that everything works. I've taken the hammer spring out just make sure that the trigger seals work. So I just put tension on the hammer at the back. You can hear it cock. Tension on the hammer, pull the trigger. Okay, everything seems to be in place. Alright, next is the trigger guard's going to get reassembled, so we'll pop that on there. And just pop another screw on there like that. So I mean, just from basics, M10 is actually really easy to work on. As you can see, I basically dismantled the entire rifle and reassembled it together again relatively quickly. Okay, so I'm going to pop, this is quite delicate now because there are O-rings on the inside of this regulator. Let's pop this out here. Alright, so this is the human regulator, and like I said, this is set at 120 bar, I think, as far as I remember. well, actually even less. According to this, it looks like it's on 100 and yeah, 115. Okay, so if you have one of these work like a bum. You really should get yourself one. It just makes your life for the M10 a lot easier. I'm going to adjust the regulator pressure to, let's go up to 100 and 130 bar. I need to go much higher than that. Okay, so when you install one of these regulators on your rifle, make sure you put some silicone grease on here, and it goes into the rear of the tube with this part forward. Okay, when you pop it in, it just goes in there like that. Just make sure that you put the O-rings back in there. This is going to be my first test at 130 bar. It was set at about 115, so it's quite low. Okay, so that's together. Now, the biggest thing that you need to remember is that if you do install one of these human regulators, ensure that you take the rear O-ring off. Otherwise the regulator can't breathe and you'll get regulator creep. And then basically the regulator won't do its job properly. So I'm going to screw this back on here. This. I think I need to push the regulator forward a little bit more. Now the reason why I want to push the regulator forward a little bit more is because there is an O-ring on there, on the rear of the regulator, and I don't want that O-ring to climb off, as that's what's going to seal it up against the valve face and give us that regulated pressure before the valve. Okay, I'm just screwing this together like this. Oh, it's a little bit difficult doing it like this. So as you screw the air tube on, you're going to get to the bottom of the air tube and screw it tight as if you were closing it and sealing it, and then I would say do like a quarter turn or less than a quarter turn back to ensure that there's a bit of a gap for the regulated air to